Hello. It's always so weird. I always get so nervous before a YouTube live, which is completely ridiculous because I live stream on TikTok literally all the time. Anyway, I want to talk to you today about dyslexia and how, when you find out what dyslexia really is, how much you don't know about dyslexia. So I've been talking quite a lot this week about how there is a real big misunderstanding about what dyslexia is and how it impacts. And there's a lot of ignorance around it, if I'm honest. And I honestly believe the only people who really know what dyslexia really is are people who are dyslexic themselves and specialist people that have done qualifications who really know what it is. There might be another handful of people around that kind of really know who it is. But I think the reason why I believe that those are the only people who really know what dyslexia is because I thought that I knew what dyslexia was. So I'd qualified as a primary school teacher. I'd been a SENCO. My children had made really good progress. I, at the time, just thought that I wasn't very clever. I hadn't particularly struggled academically, but it had been tough. I was an average attainer and I had to work really hard and over deliver to achieve what I did. And the narrative I ran in my head that I just wasn't particularly very clever, or that perhaps my listening skills weren't very good, and I didn't read enough. And if I read more, then I would understand more. And I did sometimes think I was lazy. And I mean, when I look back now, it's completely ridiculous because I massively over-delivered for teachers that believed in me. I didn't necessarily over-deliver in English A-level, but that's a conversation for nearer A-level times. So when I went off to become a specialist dyslexia assessor, to do the training, I went off thinking it was things like reading things backwards, that we needed an overlay to help us, that actually people that were dyslexic didn't have any reading and spelling skill at all, that it was related to intelligence. Loads of misconceptions and loads of misunderstandings, because that's what my experiences had taught me so far. That's what my teacher training had taught me. That's what I'd kind of picked up from teachers and colleagues that I'd worked with. And socially, that's what I'd understood from my experiences at school, I guess. And I couldn't have been more wrong. Like, dyslexia is not related to intelligence at all. And actually people with dyslexia are super intelligent because it's a specific learning difference rather than a general learning difference, which means people have strengths and weaknesses. We have spiky and uneven profiles. And I think the other thing that's really interesting is that, yes, it's difficulties with reading and spelling. I'm not doubting that. But actually, the difficulties with reading and spelling aren't as a result of difficulties with reading and spelling. They're as a result of difficulties with the spectrum that goes underneath that. So difficulties with phonological awareness, working memory processing. Those are the three main ones, verbal naming. It's those things that impact reading and spelling. And actually, so often intervention in school works on reading and spelling, but it doesn't work on the things behind that. And if we're not working on the things behind that, how can we expect people to make progress? The other thing the training really opened my eyes to was how dyslexia impacts things way beyond reading and spelling. So it truly does spill into every minute of every day. It impacts how we process and understand language. It impacts how we follow instructions. Short-term working memory impacts how we retain information, particularly if we're being given instructions that have got lots of vocabulary in that we're not familiar with. It impacts any time we kind of need to read information. It impacts any time we need to write something down, think about spelling. And actually, when you don't understand dyslexia properly, it has this huge, massive impact on confidence and self-esteem, which is the bit I think that people really don't understand. And the crazy thing about this 4-day training, well, it's not crazy, is that actually at the end of that 4 days, I recognized myself as an undiagnosed dyslexic. Suddenly, my life made sense. My tutor and one of the lecturers had pointed out to me that I was potentially dyslexic. And suddenly, my understanding of dyslexia significantly improved, because all of a sudden I could relate to dyslexics in my class. And actually I was doing that anyway without realizing, without putting that name on it, that it was dyslexia. But all of a sudden I could relate to them. And all of a sudden I had this real deep understanding of dyslexia, because actually I'd lived, breathed, experienced it. And what better way to teach about it than if you've lived, breathed and experienced it? So, I'm not flippant when I say, so many people don't understand what dyslexia is. And actually, a little bit of knowledge can do quite a lot of damage. And this is where we can link it back to what's going on in local authorities at the moment. So many local authorities, and it's all to do with budget and funding that come down from the government. But, so many local authorities have made the specialist dyslexia service redundant. It doesn't exist anymore. And actually, lots of the people that work for the local authority just happen to be really strong teachers. They don't necessarily have any specialist qualifications in dyslexia. And if you haven't got that specialist knowledge and you're not dyslexic yourself, how can you begin to advise on dyslexia? How can you begin to know what interventions are and aren't going to work? You can't possibly, because you don't know what you don't know. So that's why I think it's really, really, really important that we educate people on what dyslexia is and how it impacts. I think the other thing that's really interesting, and I've actually got a video on TikTok at the moment, which has got quite a lot of traction, is this narrative that dyslexics have in their head that they're not clever and they're not intelligent. And it doesn't matter how many times you tell a dyslexic, as long as you've done your best, that's all that matters. Confidence, and that comes from within. And actually, if you're feeling like you're less than, if you're struggling to keep up, you're not going to believe it. You have to believe it internally. And if your experience is you're not clever and you're not good enough and you can't keep up, then that's the story you're going to tell yourself. And yeah, so head over to TikTok and look at that video. It's all about, actually, I think I might have posted it as a short on here as well, actually, about how, it's almost self-harm, the way dyslexics talk to themselves in their head. If a person did that out loud to another person, it would be classed as emotional abuse. But because it's internal and because it's in our heads, then nobody's even aware of it. I'm aware of it because I've lived it and I've experienced it, and I can see it in other people through having conversations, because I know what questions to ask. But if you haven't experienced it, how do you know what questions to ask? I don't know. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this live. If you have enjoyed this live, please do go subscribe to my YouTube page. I'm planning on doing a lot more with the YouTube page and with video in the next couple of months. So please do subscribe. Feel free to comment below as well and let me know what your experiences of dyslexia are. But yeah, for me, I think there needs to be a bigger push on understanding and recognizing what dyslexia really is, how to identify it, and then how to support it. But there we have it. Anyway, I'm Jo Rees. Dyslexic Life with Jo Rees. You'll find me everywhere. Have a great day, and I will see you again soon.